Hey, everybody. Hope you're having a great day around the globe, wherever you're listening to our show. Today is sort of Hollywood. Hollywood meets Canada, really. We've got an actor, a comedian, gentleman who's been on TV and movies, who's also a UFO guy. And from what I've read about him, he's kind of gone up and down in his belief and skepticism. So I think we all do a little bit. I think that's healthy, and I want to get him to elaborate. So this is actually Jason's booking today. This is Mr. Dave Foley. I know, Jason, you've been a fan of this guy for years and years.
Huge fan of Dave Foley since Kids in the Hall, News Radio. He did the voice in Ants. He's just a fantastic guy, funny comedian. But, I fell in love with the guy when I found out he was into UFOs as much as we are. And I'm like, this guy's cool. We got to have him on, right?
Yeah, and I mean, he's just one of many people in Hollywood that are either believers in this subject or think it's plausible. And it's not just the sci-fi world. There's directors, producers, big name people that all think it's there, and people have seen things. And I mean, you look at the Tic Tac video, that was just off Catalina Island. So California area in general is a hotspot. And, that whole area of the U.S., New Mexico and Arizona, there's lots of stuff going on. And, it'd be interesting to pick his brain of kind of what's Hollywood's take on it, and as well as media and things like that. So we'll hit as many topics as we can. We'll chew the fat with our new friend, Dave Foley. And with that, we'll run our credits, and we'll be right back right here on UAP Studies Podcast.
Let's do this.
Welcome back to another episode of UAP Studies Podcast. My name is Louis Borges. Joining me as always, my best buddy, Jason Gilmet.
I love that you say my best buddy almost on every single episode.
It's true.
You know what I mean? Yeah, I know, but it feels good. It's just
we start doing this show for fun as friends, and it comes through in all of our interviews, right? We genuinely like our guests too. We don't invite people on that we don't like or think are hurting the field. And today is a proud Canadian meets Hollywood. Dave Foley is a Canadian actor and comedian. He also produces, directs, writes. He was the co-founder of the comedy group Kids in the Hall, which turned into a subsequent TV show. He's also voiced some pretty cool animated characters in big Hollywood films like A Bug's Life and Monsters University. Appearances on It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia and Hot in Cleveland. I could go on and on. The fun fact I found about Dave is, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dave, but when you're on set, you can drink upwards of 50 cups of coffee a day. Is it true?
That used to be true. I don't, not anymore, but definitely on News Radio, our props master, she clocked me at 50 cups.
Wow. Are we talking little cups, or are we talking like mugs?
I'm talking like 10. Basically, we're going 10 cup carafes of coffee, and I'd go through five of them.
Okay.
Wow. You must have had to pee the whole time.
Oh, those days, no.
When the bladder was still working.
The bladder was superhuman back in those days.
Awesome. Well, we're very glad to have you. We want to have some fun today and pick your brain on all things UFO related. I know you're an enthusiast, and you've done other big show appearances, like Joe Rogan podcast and everything else. So we appreciate your time. But for those of us, if there's a few people out there who aren't familiar with you, maybe tell us a little bit about yourself and what got you into the whole field of UFO interest.
You covered almost everything that I've done. So,
you've done a lot more than that.
Yeah. So I'm a comedian, which qualifies me in no way at all discuss UFOs, but yeah, I guess I've had lifelong interest in them, but it's an interest that's gone up and down in intensity over the years. I went up around the time of the Phoenix Lights. That kind of caught my eye, and made me think, well, that seems pretty unexplained, and the explanation seems pretty ridiculous.
Yeah.
So that got me going. Then I remember reading the Cometa report in the early 2000s from Paris, that basically the French study that came out and said, well, UFOs are real, and said that an extraterrestrial hypothesis was the most likely explanation. And I thought that got my attention. And then it sort of faded for a while until I saw James Fox's movie Out of the Blue about 10 years ago. And that was the first time I really that really led me by the hand through the real history of the UFO phenomenon and the story, and that it was so full of these really incredible, well, not incredible, credible people, credible military and government officials from all over the world. And, so it was that got me really taking it quite seriously after that. And that's been ongoing for about the last 10 years.
Right.
And then, of course, 2017, something happened.
Yeah, it was huge.
That New York Times article, which I really thought would change everything more than it has. But it's been remarkable how the conditioning, like how 70 years, maybe not 70, 60 years of conditioning to not think about UFOs is so effective that even now, after the Pentagon comes out and says they're real, no one seems to care in the mainstream of the public, I guess.
Right. Which is weird.
What do you attribute that to? Like, I heard you say on other shows that some people, they're just the average person has this total reluctance to even consider the phenomenon. And I think it was on Joe Rogan, you said that you have friends who read the New York Times cover to cover. If you ask them about something else on that day that 2017 article came out, they read that article, but somehow they didn't see the front page cover. They didn't even know. Now, and Jason made a good point. We were chatting before the show, and he goes, well, maybe it's like a religious thing. If you're not religious, front page news is something to do with religion. You're just going to skim by, and you may never. But why do you think specifically with something like UFOs that's so out there, what is it with maybe even like they're not intentionally doing this, but some people just gloss right over as soon as you bring it up?
I think what I find is people don't, it's not even like that they don't read it or they ignore it. It doesn't register in their consciousness that it was in front of them.
Yeah.
That just those, like the letters UFO will cause that some part of their brain to shut down. So they don't even consciously absorb the information at all. And I think I think it is a direct result of a very deliberate program that was started in the 50s to debunk and ridicule and and put forward just any explanation will do, answers to what UFOs are, and to create a public atmosphere where anyone who does talk about UFOs is crazy, and will be ridiculed, and to the extent that not only that it can ruin your life.
Yeah.
And I think that attitude, and I think particularly amongst people like myself, left-wing people, we're even more reluctant to deal with it, because we like to think, because we really have bought the idea that we're the rational scientific ones, and so we'll ignore all the crazy people, and as a result, this incredible story is right in front of us, and people are just not paying attention. Like I'm still astonished whenever I talk to someone and they don't know about the Tic Tac event.
Yeah, and you're right. It should have been a bigger issue than it actually turned out to be. And the stigma of UFOs, I mean, that's been built now for a long time. We know the CIA had a huge hand to play in that, to discredit people that saw UFOs. And even when you hear somebody say, I couldn't believe my eyes. Why? Your eyes don't deceive you, right? They've never deceived you before. And it's just the mind and our conditioning by society saying that you can't believe that this happened because nobody else will believe you. It's a weird psychological thing that we all do to each other, right?
Yeah, I know. And I mean, it's getting better, but I definitely know that even now, if I start to talk, it's weird. If I start to talk about the UFO subject in front of some people, there is that sort of a glaze comes over their eyes. And just that quiet, that you can see them going, well, how do I get out of this room? What's the exit?
Yeah.
But if you can keep them on it for more than about 15 minutes, suddenly the glaze goes away, and you start to see that look of, really? And they go, this is happening. And, and you can direct them to, good sources of information. So I think it's possible to break through it, but it's really difficult. And people do want to, even once they do acknowledge it, they kind of want to expunge it from their minds as quickly as possible.
Because it's scary, right?
It's confusing, and and it makes you question. You have to question everything once you accept that this is going on.
Yeah.
It reshapes reality, and it makes you rethink, like, maybe we don't have, I don't know if you guys were paying attention, but there was an article, I think it was NASA, they're saying that we haven't, or the recent NASA meetings, and we're saying, well, we haven't found extraterrestrial life yet. Okay, good for us. But what if they found us before we found them? Like, why isn't that being brought up as a question, right? It's like, there can only be one way that we'll find extraterrestrial life, is if we find them first.
And this other thing, and you can, it's kind of, when you throw out the phrase, no evidence of extraterrestrials, it's kind of a code, and it's an escape hatch for the media to not pay any attention. All the papers, all they'll report is no extraterrestrials. Right. They won't report the fact that there's all this mysterious machinery in the sky that no one can explain, that doing things that are impossible. They won't report that. They'll just report no extraterrestrials. And same thing with like the Arrow hearing. Once he says that, then the press gets a free out.
Yeah. And on the topic of media, I wanted to ask you about that. There was this NASA meeting. So, of course, Canada never really has any headlines in relation to this unless it's big news in the States. So, sure enough, we're in Canada. Night of the NASA thing, Global News, which is a massive network Canada-wide here, they're running their story. They run it right at the end. They teased it the whole way through the news broadcast. So I thought, well, maybe that's cool. This is a growing topic. So they're kind of dangling that carrot as if it was some other big expose. So that's fine. And, you get that glimmer of hope that it's going to be a serious based topic. Sure enough, they start off with, clips of the X-Files and music playing in the background. I'm like, I thought we were over this. I thought this was pre-2017. It still happens. And I mean, there've been a few networks that have there's been ebb and flow. Like James Fox was on CNN. The first time it was all woo and cool music. Second time, I think he made a comment at the end of his first interview saying, next time, if you want to do a serious look, I'd love to come back. And they did have him back, and he did do that. So there seems to be change. But as much as we think there is, it's either the media is getting this directive, or they're the same people whose eyes gloss over and they're like, okay, stick it in the end after the puppy dogs, with, the cat doing tricks. So
on a lighter note, UFOs.
So like, what do you think about mainstream media? Are they helping in any way, or are they simply just hurting?
They're not really helping at all.
Yeah, I agree.
And Canada, I'm sad to say, Canada does seem to be even further behind than U.S. coverage. And even more for me, sadly, that most of the coverage is coming from far right news or outfits. It's like News Nation and Fox, and so very little. Although at least with the NASA panel, I noticed it did get coverage on MSNBC, which was nice. And there's an NBC reporter named Gadi Schwartz, who is one of the few people that's actually in the mainstream media who's actually, going out and covering the UFO story without playing the X-Files theme.
Yeah, right.
Because I know I've been watching that. I've been watching my buddy Jeremy Corbell doing interviews over this last few years, and it's especially he's been doing a lot of interviews with Australians, and it's been interesting to watch them gradually, start. When he first would go on, it was the X-Files constantly, and they've gradually stopped giggling and started taking it more seriously and stopped playing that theme music. But it's taken years of Jeremy just saying, guys, this is real serious. Stop giggling.
Yeah, we chatted with Mary Rodwell from Australia, and same thing. She does like studies and collects data and reports, and the numbers are the same as they would be anywhere else per capita, but the number of people willing to talk is far less. In fact, she said that there are single moms that don't even want to bring that up or tell anybody because they're scared that like Child Protective Services is going to take their kids away because they think they're crazy. And this is in today's age, not like 10 or 20 years ago when it was more stigma. And the UK in a lot of areas, they have a very rich and happy enthusiast group. But in terms of the general population, it's don't go there, don't talk about it. You're still crazy. They seem to be more conservative in their views, and Canada as well. It seems like America really is the only place where there's enough interest that they can have these conferences and things like that. And then you hear things like the Cometa report coming out of France, Italy. There's other countries doing work, and maybe it's because they never had that stigma to break the government didn't make it a negative thing and that you're a Looney Tune if you believe it. So they can actually do the work without, the trauma of 70 years of denial. So
yeah, I think it's definitely true, especially I think in South America, where culturally they've never had the taboo about. Even I think Mexico has had less of a taboo about UFOs historically. Yeah, and as I said, I can't. At least the U.S. you do have Congress tackling it on some level, and I don't know that. And I know there's one member of Parliament in Canada who keeps pushing for.
Yeah, Larry Maguire.
Yeah, and that's the only person I've ever heard of in Canada who's pushing for government to be open and talk about UFOs.
Yeah, since Paul Hellyer, anyway. Paul was big on it, but he was later in his age when he started his work, and we all expire at some point, right?
Yes. Yeah. And of course, I was talking to Ralph Blumenthal recently, and he wrote the book Believer about John Mack.
Yeah.
And I said, it's interesting that you use that title because that word is used to dismiss people who, I've heard people dismissing Leslie Kean, who wrote the New York Times article with Blumenthal, by saying, of course, she's a believer.
Yeah.
And that just saying believer is it's that free pass for everyone to just dismiss everything they're saying, not look at any of the data, not listen to any of the sources. Just using that phrase shuts everything down, which is and that seems like Paul Hellyer, I think he was constantly labeled as a believer, and which is synonymous with lunatic.
And they used his age against him too. They're like, oh, he's lost it, the poor guy, anything they could to, expose a vulnerability or make it seem like there existed one.
But they did that to that general in Israel too, that recently, a couple of years ago, some sort of federation. It's like, dude, the guy ran the program for what, 30 years?
Yeah.
And we're not going to give him credit or at least go, okay, what are you saying? Like, everybody just dismissed it. And, we got guys like Paul Hellyer and that dude that I can't pronounce his name to save my life.
I am a shed.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. No, it's very serious guy.
Yeah.
Great credentials, ran their space program, And
he's at risk of treasonous charges. If he's just making stuff up, his government's going to string him out. They're not going to stand behind him. So when you have these people in positions of power saying big things and nobody says anything, probably because it's true.
Yeah, well, you've got the UFO subject is the only one where you have somebody who has incredible credentials, like scientists like Gary Nolan, impeccable credentials, long history of doing great work, starting companies, advancing the state of science for his whole career. So when he comes out and starts talking seriously about UAPs, in any other subject, it would be, this is a very serious, credible person. We should probably pay attention to what he's saying. But when it's UFOs, the response is, we should dismiss everything he's ever done in his life.
Yeah. The cancel culture.
Yeah. We should downplay everything about this man. We should start disparaging his scientific achievements because he's taking UFOs seriously.
Yeah. Yeah. And you mentioned John Mack. John Mack had a huge influence on me. I've always been obsessed with the alien abduction phenomenon, which I really shot myself in the foot because as a kid, I don't know if you remember this, but I would go to the library, and you guys probably went through this too. You would go to the UFO section, and it was almost like taking out porn. Like you didn't want to be seen, and you would bring it up to the front. You would hide the cover until you got to the front. And it was ridiculous, but John
checked out a lot of porn. You got the whole system down.
Well, we've all been there. We've all been there.
Yeah.
We didn't have the internet forever.
You can speak your UFOs inside the porn.
They're less taboo than the porno.
I'm just reading jugs. I'm not reading UFO magazine.
How did that end up there? I have no idea. Well, I might as well buy it while I'm here.
Oh my God, I'm so sorry.
But it was stupid because, throughout your teen years, you're developing, you're going through all these paranoid phases, and I'm reading about abduction phenomenon. I'm totally terrified to go to bed at night,
Yeah.
But John Mack had a huge influence. And he, again, he was a sort of a pioneer, somebody to push through all the stigma and said, look, there's something here. Because you mentioned this, I think was on Chrissy Newton, or maybe it would have been Joe Rogan, that you had changed your mind on the alien abduction phenomenon. recently, right? And yeah, there's something to it. It's either it's a new mental illness that millions of people across the world have, or it's actually happening. There's no in between here.
Yeah. And it seems like, yeah, and I guess it's one of these where I didn't deal with it because because it is scary and it is, and it does seem weird. Uh, but after a certain point, I sort of went, well, if I'm accepting that these machines are in the air, I don't know who's flying them or what they're doing here, but if I'm accepting that they're here, then it's kind of illogical to just deny any possibility of abductions.
Right.
Because if they are from somewhere else, it makes sense they would abduct us. Why wouldn't they?
Yeah.
You're gonna, it just doesn't, there was no real logic to continuing to deny it. So I don't know what the abduction phenomenon is. I don't know if it's, my sense is that it's something that is really happening. It is a physical occurrence that is happening to people. I think John Mack started to believe that it was something that wasn't necessarily happening in our reality, but it might be something that's occurring with these people in another reality or in another sort of plane of consciousness. And but I know who was it that wrote Missing Time? I'm blanking on his name now.
Bud Hopkins?
Bud Hopkins, thank you.
Yeah.
I know Bud Hopkins.
I got you back. Yeah.
Was on the other side of it. He and David Jacobs were very adamant that no, these people are physically being removed from their space. They're taken into a physical craft, and things are physically being done to them. And that is a dark part of the whole UFO story.
Absolutely.
And if it's true, and if it's happening to millions of people, which I guess Bud Hopkins and David Jacobs did a poll, I guess, trying to determine how many people are, and they kept trying to reduce the number in their poll as much as they could. But they kept coming up with a huge number that is millions of people in the US alone who have had an abduction experience.
Yeah, 1 in 50, I think, was the result out of that Roper poll. So I think that's like over 6.5 million people just in the US if you go off that alone. So it's insane.
Yeah, that is, and that's the smallest number they could make the poll turn out, I think.
Yeah. Yeah,
and that's the people that remember the experience, right? There's some people that they'll live their entire life not remembering what took place, right?
Yeah.
That's trippy. Yeah. It could be 2 out of 50 or 3 out of 50 like. We don't, and that was in the 1990s. Let's retake the poll. Let's find out, right? We're a lot more open about it. I know we've talked to people in the military, the CIA, people in government are having these experiences. If they themselves haven't seen something, they know somebody who has. Yeah. And it's crazy. For me, I don't know why I track people to tell me their stories, like out of nowhere. Like I mentioned this a few times on the podcast, but people would just start like, hey, I seen him once, like out of nowhere. Yeah. Which to me scares the crap out of me. Just like how many people locally, in my area have seen these things, much less worldwide. So it is a phenomenon that I think it supersedes government and military. It's a humanitarian issue and they should be upfront about it.
Yeah. Cause it's really traumatizing for people. And so the event itself is traumatizing, but then to be dismissed and told you're crazy is doubly traumatizing. Yeah. Have you guys seen the aerial phenomenon movie yet?
Yeah. We interviewed Randall Nickerson, and we've brought it up in a few different shows, but that's exactly correct. What we're talking about now, the whole trauma of the girl even going back to the school now as an adult, everything come rushing back. And we've had people with experiences. I think Kevin Day and I said, what was more traumatizing, the event or the way people treated you after the fact, making, belittling your claims? And he said it was both. They were both equally as damaging. And I think that's the case with the aerial school kids too.
Yeah. You just see how much that all of these kids, they've scattered all around the world, but they still have, they're dealing with this event in their lives, even though the event itself wasn't a dark event for them, but it was frightening. Yeah. But then to not be taken seriously and to not be able to talk about it and to have this, your whole life, like that girl, she's been painting that scene for her whole life and hasn't been able to kind of, I guess, incorporate it into her life in a healthy way. And so this so the stigma isn't just an inconvenience. It actually does real damage in people's lives. It can destroy people. I mean, there's was it the scientist James McDonald back in the 50s, after in the 60s, I guess it was after Blue Book was shut down, because he protested and said there is a serious thing here, and we really should be studying this, and that the Condon report was a whitewash. So he was going public, destroyed his scientific career, and he wound up committing suicide like a year later.
Right.
No one took him seriously, even though he was a really credible, physicist.
Do you think that? Oh, sorry, Louis.
Sorry, I was just going to say, we're mentioning the change that happens with people. There may even be physiologically changes. I know Dr. Gary Nolan, we interviewed him, and he mentioned that they're doing studies on regions of the brain, the basal ganglia and stuff like that, to see if, in fact, after a contact event, we have somehow changed. Like, there's areas of the brain that normally wouldn't fire. Now they fire like crazy. And the only thing they can find common to that are like yogis or people that are trained in like deep tantric yoga, and guys like Deepak Chopra that can just go into these really deep meditative states, and they can activate those parts of their brain. So we brought up consciousness earlier. I wanted to sort of get your opinion on the whole consciousness aspect in relation to UAP and UFO sightings in general.
Well, it definitely seems to be a big part of it. I mean, and I actually, after all these years, I actually did have a UFO experience, like a year ago, January, with Jeremy Corbell. He and I were out walking his dog, and we saw what was a UFO. We saw this orangey golden craft traveling in this big half circle around this valley. And one of the things that was really interesting about it was that it seemed to be interacting with our consciousness. It seemed to be controlling our emotional state as we were viewing it. Like, because neither one of us got excited, and neither one of us took a picture of it, and neither one of us spoke for the entire event, except for at one point when Jeremy just said, unprompted, "I'm not even going to take a picture." Like he was responding to
Jeremy Corbell said that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And, this is a guy who practices getting his camera out as fast as he can so that he'd be ready for this sort of thing.
That's crazy.
Yeah. But so it definitely felt like all of our emotions were being tamped down, and we were just very quietly watching, and just, it felt like the idea was that we were just supposed to be quiet and pay attention. And, and then again, the next day I went to my iPad to try and draw it, and I can't draw at all. I have no artistic ability. But within 15 minutes, I was able to find the app I needed, find all the tools within the app I needed, the colors I needed, the effects to get the right sort of softness of it, and was able to find everything I needed in 15 minutes, draw exactly what we had seen. And it's beyond my actual abilities to do that.
So you've been upgraded.
Yeah, and I think if I tried to draw it again now, I probably couldn't.
You were meant to do it at that time.
Yeah. So I was able to send it to Jeremy and say, "Is that what we saw?" And he said, "Yeah, that's exactly what we saw."
But it's crazy that because we hear this often, obviously, in the world of ufology, how these crafts seem to operate in a way that we're like, oh, that's not a big deal, or control masses. Like there's that event that took place at I think it was a drive-in theater in the 1990s, where everybody saw this massive craft and nobody moved. They're just like, like it's nothing. And that's the part that's concerning. It's like, okay, are we in control of the consciousness, or do they just take control of it once they're around? That's the scary bit. Well,
that's the thing, is I think we're realizing that consciousness is a trickier subject than we ever imagined. And we're only at the early stages of realizing that consciousness has effects outside of our brains.
Right.
There's like Princeton's been doing their global consciousness study for over 20 years now, where they look at how human consciousness and attention affects random number generators.
Yeah.
I did not hear about that. That's cool.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
like Dean Radin and the I think it's the Center for Noetic Studies or something it's called. They've been doing that for quite a few decades now, seeing, things like entanglement and if you can affect random number generators. And I don't know if they're any closer to the answer, but apparently it works. There's something to it.
Yeah, I don't think they know what the mechanism is that's at play, but they just keep piling up more and more data that it works. And coincidentally, they set up the global study right before 9/11 happened. So they had set up all these random number generators all over the planet, and to monitor what happens when large numbers of people are paying attention to a single event. And then on cue, 9/11 happened, and all of these random number generators all around the planet started going off randomness to an extent that I think they said the likelihood of it was in the billions to one against that the machines would all do this.
Wow.
And they've been piling up the data ever since then. I think one of the events that they listed was Pierre Trudeau's funeral, when Justin Trudeau was reading the eulogy, because they said almost every single Canadian was listening to the eulogy at the time.
Yeah.
And so also the random number generators in Canada went off randomness at that moment.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So what do you make of like the CE5, in terms of everybody putting their attention on the same thing and trying to have manifestations and all that? Do you think it's possible? Do you think it's a good or bad idea? What do you think?
Well, I think it is possible. Well, one of the things that's about my experience was that right before it, I'd been just looking at all the commercial air traffic off in the distance and thinking what a beautiful clear night it was. The stars are very bright. I don't even think there was a moon in the sky. And I said, this would be a great night to see something. And 3 minutes later, Jeremy said, Dave, turn around. And there was this thing in the sky. So it seemed like we asked for it and it showed up. So I think, and I definitely know there's a lot of groups. I know in Los Angeles, there's a group that gathers. I've never gone out with them, but I've heard they gather in Los Angeles and do summoning, they call it. And it seems to work. They seem, mostly it seems like they summon these sort of spheres of light. I don't think you need to pay anyone thousands of dollars to learn how to do it. I would caution people not to do that.
Good advice.
If somebody
would
wants
also
to
caution people not to do that.
Yeah, if someone wants to charge you thousands of dollars to go out to the desert and just
especially if you have these inherent abilities just as a human being, you can just train them, or maybe we had them and then they kind of got dumbed down through the process of growing up and conditioning from external sources. But we all are a little bit psychic, and that's the point of those random number generator tests and ESP. I think if there's 5 ESP cards, the average person will get 2. Some will get more, some fewer, but still, even to randomly guess 2 out of 5, those are high percentages, like for people that are quote unquote not psychic,
Yeah, no. And look, and Stanford had some pretty amazing results with their remote viewing studies, that again, people will bring those up to dismiss people that were involved in them, but they got results.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's,
and they nail. Yeah, and they nail, like they'll give them a geographic location, and like, I'll just go there. I don't understand how they do it personally, but that's pretty trippy because they'll give them details of what's taking place right now. Like, how is that possible? You're thousands of miles away.
And they try to trick them too. They don't just take these people's word at face value. They'll give them some random coordinates for a gas station somewhere just to see if the guy's going to say, oh, it's an underground base, like they're already going at it with a skeptical mind because they know that people in peer review are just going to shred their work if it's not legit. And a lot of people, I think they have these abilities, maybe aren't as polished. I think it's a very small percentage that can actually do it. And I formed this opinion off of chatting with people in that field, people who are trained remote viewers and have connections with some legitimate big names. I think, I think there's definitely something there, but it's kind of spooky when you start reading some of the things that they've seen. Again, underground bases on the moon, they talk about going somewhere and seeing entities, and then the entities become aware they're being watched. Like, it can get pretty dark when you start going down that.
Yeah. Which is then, and of course that takes you into things like DMT as well.
Yeah.
The possibility that that what people experience when they do DMT might be connected to the UFO phenomenon. That the entities that are experienced there may have baby tied into all of this. So, very much consciousness may be at the root of all of this.
Right.
And I mean, there's Donald Hoffman who's been doing his studies about evolution, where he believes that evolution, not only did evolution not lead us to have senses that allow us to perceive reality as it is, that evolution actually prevents us from seeing reality as it is, because there's no fitness outcome to it. There's no need to see reality.
Right.
And we only need senses to get us, to let us know if a tiger's going to eat us, to let us know if there's something we can eat, and if there's someone we can mate with. And those are the only senses.
Or the other way around, right?
Yeah. So those are the only our senses. Those are the only things we need senses for.
Right.
So we, and he, and I don't understand his theory, but he thinks that the base unit of reality is conscious entities. And I have no idea what that means or what he's talking about. And I've heard him talk about it several times, and I still don't get it. But that he believes that space-time is not fundamental to the universe, but that consciousness is fundamental to the universe, which is interesting.
And I love that theory, because what if it is a natural progression of the universe, is that it creates life creates consciousness, and consciousness, whatever, evolution. If we're dealing with because I'm curious as to your thoughts on this, but if we're looking at classification, I think there's 5 classifications for civilizations out there, right? Mm-hmm. What do you think we're dealing with? Like, if this is complex and everything looks like magic to us, we can't wrap our head around it. Like, what class of civilization do you think we're dealing with?
Oh gosh, I don't know.
You're talking Kardashev scale, right, Jason?
I think so. Like, they're saying if you're class 5, you can manipulate the universe to your will. And
we're a level 0.
Yeah,
right?
We're not even class 1.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. So class 1 is where you can control all the energy on the planet.
Yeah.
Right. And then class 2, you control all the energy of your sun.
Yeah. And that's what the things like Dyson spheres and theories like, mechanical structures around a star. That's a class 2. And then class 3 is all the power in the galaxy. And it goes from there, right? I mean, it's all theoretical, but we are not even a class 1 in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, no, and definitely, I think, because that's the thing with the UFO thing, and also, look, so many things that fall into the category of paranormal. There's the attitude of this is something that can't happen, so it isn't happening. So the same thing with like psychic phenomena. It can't happen, so it isn't. Yeah. Even if there's the amount of, even if it's just anecdotal evidence, even if it's an overwhelming amount of anecdotal evidence. The attitude of science is just that, we still have this notion that we still keep thinking in terms of human scales.
That's right.
It's like people keep wanting, people keep bringing up the Fermi paradox even now, which really you can sort of go, well, all right, but that paradox kind of falls apart if there's UFOs. Yeah, right. And where is everyone? Well, people keep telling you where they are. They're here. They're hovering over nuclear missile bases. They're splashing into the ocean next to aircraft carriers. They're all over the place. But the attitude is still, well, it can't be happening, so it isn't. Right. And no matter how many times they're told it is happening, they'll just, and you go through any kind of, just tortured debunking theories, of how somehow every single, the top, surveillance systems in the world all glitch at the exact right time. And in complete synchrony with eyewitnesses, and the glitch just happens to pump out data that totally supports the eyewitness accounts and the on-craft FLIR footage. So you have to believe that everything went wrong at the same time in the same way, and that all the people involved all had the exact same hallucination or misidentification.
Yeah.
And that's considered more plausible. And they'll call that Occam's razor, which is it's the exact opposite of Occam's razor. Occam's razor says the simplest answer is they saw what they saw.
Yeah. Right. And no matter the observer, like you mentioned, doesn't matter the credentials of the individual. Like we have fighter pilots. These people are trained to defend countries and drop bombs on people. Like these are highly trained military people, millions of dollars spent on their like learning to observe and stuff like that. And they see something and we're like, well, must be seagulls. That baffles me. And like even Louis and I always talk about this, but they'll always have like an expert on, like, you know, Gary Nolan, and then some guy who just disagrees with it, but doesn't have the same level of credentials at all.
No, and that's the thing is the people like to trot out the notion, well, you know, eyewitness testimony is the worst kind of evidence, and they're right when you're talking about a bank robbery. You're in a bank, people run in with guns, and they hold up the bank. Yes, your eyewitness testimony is going to be flawed because of adrenaline and fear, and you're not taking the time to observe the data as it's coming through. So yeah, that kind of eyewitness testimony isn't great. But say you had me, or you asked me to, I walked through a park, and then after I walked the park, you asked me, all right, what kind of vegetation did you see in the park? And I go, oh, well, there were some trees. There's I guess some were deciduous, some were conifers. I think there was a palm tree, there was grass and some shrubs. So that's my eyewitness account of walking through the park. But if you have a trained biologist walk through the park, you know, they're going to have a different eyewitness account. It's going to be a lot more detailed. You know, they're going to, and so expert eyewitnesses, it is different. It is quantitatively different. Right. So yes, eyewitness testimony is flawed, but when you're trained, as you said, it's so much training, and they're trained to know what should be in the sky, because if they don't know, they get killed.
Right.
That's their job, is to go up and kill other people and not get killed themselves. You know, so it's very serious work.
Yeah. And plus, like the maintenance too, right, Louis? Like these guys, they do maintenances on their eyes, like they get checked all the time. So yeah. And they go into every operation knowing they're going to be debriefed at the end of it. Like, you know, normal eyewitness accounts, you don't have that. You don't go, well, today I'm going to go out and witness a bank robbery. Right. I better be prepared. But they're prepared. They know they're going to be debriefed after they fly.
Yeah. And even in their day-to-day lives, those military guys, they seem to always have a situational awareness. They're always looking for an exit. It's just in their training. And, you know, we talk about eyewitness testimony. Conveniently, in the UFO topic, it doesn't count. But we've been convicting people and putting them to death in courts of law based on one or two people's eyewitness testimony for hundreds, if not thousands of years. If 10 people stand in a line and say, that guy killed that dude, you're going to jail for life. Like, and we will all accept it that, yeah, even a jury, like we believe enough opinions, we go with the majority, right? But when it comes to this phenomenon, you get thousands, hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of reports, but you just can't. Even the Arrow hearing is saying the same thing. Like they want to start a public facing version of this, but they're like, but you know, we got to be careful because otherwise anyone with a camera, ... So what, everyone who's caught something, they're all idiots with a camera? Like that's insulting to these people who have had these experiences.
I know, that's the other amazing thing. People keep saying that, you know, everyone's got these high definition cameras in their pockets now. How come we're not getting better pictures? But then when you see the pictures taken by high definition cameras that are in our pockets, they aren't that good. Yeah. Why do you keep saying, you know, we should have better pictures when we're showing you these are the pictures? Yeah. These cameras aren't built to take pictures of UFOs. Like try to take a picture of an airplane in the sky. It won't look like anything. Yeah. Or try to take a picture of the full moon. You'll never be able to convince anyone the moon exists based on that.
Good point.
And that happened to me last October. There was a light in the sky. It was there for, 5 minutes. I didn't think anything of it. Came back 20 minutes later, still there. So I called Jason, filmed this thing real time. He checks all the air traffic. He's like, there's a windstorm happening. All the planes are grounded. Like, what the hell is that thing? And we're filming this for 40 minutes and I'm trying to get video and picture and the camera does not like it. I can see it clear as day. It's an orange ring. It's got to be, way bigger than a plane based on the distance that it was at. And as soon as it would try to focus, it would do that sort of zoom in, zoom out. And then you get those distortions like everybody else's video. Yeah. It's either that it's just too dim for the aperture of the camera. I have a fairly good phone and camera, so it's not, a hardware issue. But I think maybe it's just we're not supposed to see it. You mentioned your sighting. Neither one of you had a thought to even grab your phone.
Yeah.
And, a lot of people say the same thing. So maybe we
And
can't get the footage that we think we can get,
yeah, definitely. I think whatever's in the sky has full control over when and how it's viewed.
Yeah.
Right.
And especially you look at the sightings that Ryan Graves was talking about off the East Coast. And he said, I mean, most of the time these things would be on their radar. They could see them in an infrared, but they were invisible to the naked eye.
Yeah.
And again, with the debunkers, they go, well, see, that's proof it wasn't there. It's good. No, that's proof this is weirder than that.
Mm-hmm.
That these things can be invisible, but be detected on other systems, and then at will can be visible. They seem to be able to choose whether to be visible, to be seen in visible light or not.
Right.
So the fact that something isn't seen by the naked eye shouldn't make it suddenly, oh, there, see, there's nothing to this. That should spark you to go, this is weirder.
Yeah. There's lots of things we can't see, we can't hear. Doesn't mean they're not there. I mean, you don't see radio waves, but you can tune into a radio station. So seeing is not necessarily believing, because we're limited by our senses. We are essentially just evolved animals. Whether it was intentional evolvement or not, that's a different opinion, but we are basically animals. And to your point earlier,
very narrow band.
Yeah, we're built for hunting and foraging. So if it doesn't suit survival or eating something or preventing yourself from getting eaten or reproducing, we didn't need it, essentially, right? So we're fairly poor observers in the grand scheme of things. Even bees can see infrared and we can't, or no, they see ultraviolet and we can't.
And bats have a 360-degree view of their environment from echolocation.
That's crazy. Yeah.
They see everything at once.
That's not
through sound that turns into vision.
Yeah.
So we're very limited as a species on what we're able to, like even germs. We didn't know germs existed. Now we got microscopes. We could look into their world. It's probably the same thing with this phenomenon. It's like, where are the germs, right?
And the experts debunked germs when they were discovered.
Yeah.
We fight everything. Yeah.
It was the experts that would, ostentatiously refuse to wash their hands in the surgery, and we're doing the debunking. They were the skeptics of their time.
Yeah.
So it's, the expert debunking is should be looked at cynically, I think.
What are your thoughts on skeptics versus debunkers? Because I'm okay with skeptics. A skeptic is someone with a different opinion, but they're willing to hear information. A debunker, to me anyway, has their mind made up. Doesn't matter what you tell them, what evidence you provide. No, it's like this. End of story.
It's a dogma. Yeah.
Well, the term debunking implies, the word bunk is in there. So they're going from the assumption that it is bunk.
Right off the bat.
They're going to debunk it. They're going to get rid of this bunk. It is a notion. Again, it comes from that notion, this can't be happening, so it isn't. So if they can find one element of an incident that they can replicate in some other means, like if you can, again, it's like I could hang a paper plate from a string and take a picture of it and make it look exactly like the moon, but that doesn't mean I've proven that the moon doesn't exist.
Right.
So if you can create a similar effect by other means, that in no way means that you've proven that that's what happened. It's like, I don't even like to amplify him by saying his name, but I think we all know the guy I'm talking about.
We just
yeah. And it's dishonest because they all deliberately narrow their aperture to the point where they can plausibly explain one element of something, and they ignore any kind of corroborating data that says that their debunking is false.
Right.
Like any of the data, any of the radar data, eyewitness testimony, infrared footage. They'll ignore anything that doesn't fit the one thing they can explain.
Right. Grab the one snippet and throw out everything else, right?
Yeah. And
it's almost crazier to move the stars out of the way to fit the debunker story than the original UFO sighting story in the first place. That is less crazy when you look at what rationale is involved with making that square peg fit in a round hole for the debunker.
Yes. And, and claiming things like that trained Navy crews who work the night shift out in the ocean where the sky is very, very clear. The sky is on top of you, a night sky with no light pollution. And these people are very, very familiar with the sky. So claiming that these people suddenly one night mistake stars for UFOs.
Yeah.
That the stars they've been looking at every night for their entire mission, but tonight they can't tell the difference between stars in the sky and objects moving 1,000 feet from their ship. They can't tell the difference.
And making 90-degree turns.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they all went crazy at the same time. The entire battleship went nuts.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Several ships. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. About the 2019 swarming, and even then they'll say, oh, it was Chinese drones come from a merchant vessel. And you go, well, if that's the case, we've seen what happens when the Chinese have something in our sky and we know it's the Chinese. We saw the spy balloon. That's what happens. Wall-to-wall coverage. It gets shot down. Diplomatic visits to China are canceled. It's a lot of uproar when we know it's Chinese. But because it was the Russell, right? The USS Russell. It and about a dozen other ships, by the way. They're swarmed by hundreds of things. And there's no press coverage, no press conferences, just quietly leaving it to the debunkers to say, oh, they mistook stars.
It's like swamp gas 3.0.
Yeah.
It's absurd.
And it's an insult to these professionals. I mean, we often say that disclosure won't come from a government organization that's going to spill the beans. It's going to be people that serve their country, regardless of what country it is, whether it's Canada, United States, or Uganda. People stepping up. And by the way, Uganda, you never hear anything UFO related. They're up to something. But it's it's crazy. It takes the whole world to look into this, like scientists, law enforcement. Like we have all these people that are like, even doctors. You go to your doctor tells you, look, you got cancer. You take it for what you take his diagnosis seriously. But if he says, you know what, like sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and there's 3 little entities at the end of my bed and then I don't remember anything. The guy's a quack, right?
Yeah,
it's
I got to get a new doctor.
Yeah, exactly. We don't weigh these experiences. And for me personally, I think the abduction phenomenon is like our first step because that's where we should look. What are they doing with us? Right. And these people are telling us, look, this is what is happening. Okay. Then secondary is what is their technology capable of doing? But their interaction with us globally, individually, affects us, and the government and religious organizations and military can't do shit. Can't solve the issue. This is a humanitarian issue, which we all face.
We can't prevent it. We can't explain it. We can't. But we can not add to the cruelty.
Good point.
I think we can do that. We can not make people's lives worse. That's the thing. I think that again, going back to the debunkers, it's not harmless. The debunking, it's not harmless at all. It's harmful to people who have had experiences and seen things and know they aren't crazy, and who live in fear of talking about it and live in fear of of either losing friends or being ridiculed by family or losing jobs, having careers destroyed. It's like your doctor. Yeah, your doctor isn't going to talk about it because he's going to lose patients.
Right.
So it's not. It really isn't. It isn't harmless.
Yeah. What do you make of the varied sort of assortment of things associated with the phenomenon? I mean, it's not just nuts and bolts craft anymore. There's orbs. There's talk of cryptids and different creatures and everything else. There's the quote unquote woo. But what do you make of all that? Even poltergeists. Like, do you think these are separate phenomenon all happening? Or do you think they're somehow related when you get into that invisible world?
It seems like it seems related, and it does seem like it's all connected, and that various elements of the paranormal are tied into this, and it's, said like it's like once you become untethered from certainty, you drift through a lot of weird subjects, and
The rabbit hole, as we'd call it.
yeah, and the like I imagine you guys probably read the Skinwalkers at the Pentagon.
Yeah.
George Knapp's.
Yeah, we interviewed them both after it came
Yeah.
out. It was fascinating to talk to them, and the book was super well done.
Yeah, and those are serious, and these are serious people, and all they're saying is they're not saying they know what's going on, but they're saying this is happening. So I mean, what do you do with 7-foot tall bipedal wolves showing up in people's backyards?
Yeah. Or the hitchhiker effect, right? Even their wives start having weird.
Wives of the children.
And it's almost like even if they encountered a craft or a being, when the hitchhiker comes through, it's almost always poltergeist. It's weird, bizarre things, a lot less tangible than the initial sighting. So in my mind, anyway, it shows that that's got to be some kind of a link that, and I mentioned earlier, I have a friend who's into remote viewing, and I asked him like, hey, can you teach me to get into this? And it was like, don't go there. Don't try it. You will get a hitchhiker effect, flat out. Even people that are professionals, trained and practiced at this, they have things happen and they just want to get rid of it. So like, don't go there unless you know what you're doing.
Although I want to go to Skinwalker. I do.
You got to get through the TV crew to get in nowadays.
Huh?
You got to go around the TV crew. That's all there nowadays.
Yeah.
You probably could get on there.
Yeah.
I'd like to go. Well, I'm friends with George and Jeremy, so they have good.
That's true.
There.
You could pull those strings. Plus, you're a celebrity, so you could pull more weight, right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think it's funny when they have like UFO cons and stuff like that, and they'll win a trip to go camping with Travis Walton. Or any of those abductees, right? Like Whitley Strieber. I'm like, why? Why would you go camping? You're risking something, right?
Yeah. There's something going on around these people. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and I was going to mention too, like NASA was mentioning that orbs are global, right? That it is a global phenomenon. They don't know what it is, but they're dismissing that it could be aliens, of course. Which to me is like, okay, well, if we don't know that it's human, what else could it be, right?
Yeah. Oh, and we do know that it isn't any of the major nations. We know it isn't. We know it isn't. It isn't the U.S. It isn't Russia. It isn't China.
Right, because these things don't crash. If they were like drones, crash all the time, but these things don't crash. They fly. They maneuver. They seem to avoid obstacles. Like they're intelligently controlled. Yet they're like in the daytime they appear as spheres. That just move really, really fast. I mean, we've seen some pictures, right, and videos of them flying by. Jeremy, I think, recently posted something similar. That's happening over war. Yeah, and it's crazy. Like, what do you make of the orbs?
Well, that's the thing that made me crazy was the Arrow hearing that was terrible. But he actually showed video of a sphere flying through a war zone in a way that things can't fly. The sphere, it had no means of lift, no control surfaces, and it's clearly traveling. It's directed and at speed through a battle zone, and it was obviously significant enough that it was tracked by these spy drones. And so Kirkpatrick shows this video, and no one asks any questions, and he says, well, this is currently an unexplained. And then they just move on. It's like, Gillibrand, nobody there said, well, what is unexplained about this? What do you know about it? What data do you have on it? How is it flying? What speed would you say it was traveling at? Not one question. When he just showed them this sphere flying through a war zone.
That's crazy. That was their chance, right?
Yeah. And he admits it's unexplained, but no questions. I can't fathom that at all. And no follow-up from the press. Like no one in the press is basically there's been no coverage of it. Again, endless coverage of the stupid spy balloon.
Right.
Yeah.
But nothing on this thing that he, the head of Arrow says they can't explain. And clearly this is a video of something that should not be moving the way it is. And it clearly is not a balloon. It's not moving in any way like a balloon moves.
Or swamp gas. Yeah.
Or swamp gas.
Do you remember the first Arrow hearing? They showed a little video clip of something. It was just like a quick zip. They had to rewind it. And it's like, that was, I guess what they were trying to say is this is the best we got. Like, these are the videos people are asking us to investigate. But you have the Tic Tac and all these Pentagon released videos. Why wouldn't they use that? Like, we know they have footage. We've seen the footage, and they have better versions of it, longer and better quality. Yeah. But, when they put forward that as, it's almost, again, to poke an eye in everybody who wants to see something happen here. It's kind of like, hey, everybody, we have to do this. This is what we're talking about. You see how stupid it is. Let's just move on to something more important now that we've given these guys, they're diminishing the effect and what's actually going on.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great disservice, and it's not, and it's great. It's dishonest. It's, I think everyone at this point knows that Arrow is getting a lot more information than they're feeding back to the public. We all keep hearing about these whistleblowers that are going and giving testimony. We've all heard Ryan Graves' testimony, David Fravers and Alex Dietrich's testimony. We all know, and basically anytime there's a hearing and they don't talk about the Tic Tac, they're avoiding it. That should be questioned every single time. So what do you know now about the Tic Tac? How have you, what are you closer to explaining it? What's the data? So if they keep trying to come up with something that's going to be boring for the public. They just keep trying to make it boring for the public, which is, exactly what the Robertson Commission said they should do back in the 50s. Demystify it, debunk, explain any mundane explanation that you can come up with will do. And we're still in that exact same space.
What blows me away is like even the Rendlesham Forest incident, where these military personnel were right next to the bloody craft, and then you got people. No, it was a White House, not White House, a lighthouse. At the end, it's like it's an insult. Yeah, it's an insult to these men and women,
and the medical injuries that some of those guys sustained to this day that are still proof of something happening. Yes.
And he finally got it on the record that he finally got paid. For the
took him almost 30 years to do it, but
saying it's a lighthouse. So trained professionals, they make notes. They're up close enough to draw pictures of what they're seeing, but somehow
tape recorder too, right?
Yeah,
the tape recorder.
He's recording it all, but somehow it's a lighthouse that they're all very familiar with, that they've seen every night. That they've been on this base, they know this lighthouse very well, So I remember Holt, I think, saying, I've got pictures of me standing outside that lighthouse. I know that lighthouse. It was nowhere near what we saw, and in a flashing light coming through the woods we're professionals. We're not going to mistake it for a triangular craft, right in front of us,
And it gets weirder than that. If you look at the code that Jim Peniston supposedly got out of that, a binary, and then it took, I don't know how many decades before somebody decoded it. In fact, our next episode is with Gary Osborne, and he's going to break down some of the stuff that come out of this code. But essentially, there's a lot of things, both dealing with ancient history and like sacred locations, places that are hotspots, that we're just finding out now that, hey, this all came out of that code. It's like they gave us that 30 years ago, knowing we would need it now, right at the time it was decoded. There's a lot of spooky stuff that come out of Rendlesham, not just a couple guys seeing a lighthouse. There's a lot more to it.
Yeah, and even then, I still heard like McWest say, well, Rendlesham, there was a lighthouse. And that's, he doesn't even go into the details. Well, I hear there was a lighthouse. Yeah. And so case closed.
It's dumb. And even, was it John Burroughs? He still has to go to Wright-Patterson Air Force for the heart condition that he received or got from that craft. Yeah. Like, that's crazy. That's a crazy detail. Why isn't he allowed to go to regular hospital? Why does he have to go to Wright-Patterson Air Force for anything heart-related?
Yeah. And his eye, too, I believe.
That's true. Yeah. That's a bit of detail that's like very interesting, right? So Tim Burchett was actually on our friend Christy Newton. You were on her podcast not too long ago, and on Rebelliously Curious. If you haven't checked out that podcast, please do. For our listeners, But basically, Tim Burchett had mentioned something on a podcast that really hit home, and he was talking about Washington, D.C. And he said, this town from top to bottom, and I'm paraphrasing here, is crooked, broken, and greedy. And that's the current state that Washington is in. And we're asking for disclosure at the time where everybody's just out on their own. It's not about the people. It's about how can you further your career in politics. So it's an interesting time in the States to see what is happening and what they're trying to accomplish. But at the same time, they're dealing with some of the worst corruption probably in U.S. history.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's always been endemic to politics, but certainly it's, I mean, I guess if there's anything to be optimistic about, it's the fact that the UFO story is the one thing that is getting bipartisan support.
Right.
And partisan legislation is being written. And that there's no other example of Republicans and Democrats working together. And they're working together unanimously to pass legislation on UFOs. So that may be some sign. I mean, I know I talked to Leslie Kane, stays very optimistic about it, and more optimistic than I am.
She's a sweetheart, yeah.
Yeah, but she still stays optimistic that things are going to come out and that the government is going to do something. So I think, I'm hoping she's right. And I am encouraged by the fact that, the people like Tim Burchett and Gillibrand working together on something, that's impossible that could happen, but it's happening,
Yeah. It's like the only thing they agree in so far is the UFO subject, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. That's kind of cool.
Baby steps. Again, we get frustrated because we never get anything out of these, but there are some people that are wiser and more calm-headed than we are. And they say, listen, at least they're talking about it. Okay. It might seem like they're still just brushing over it, but it's a public thing from the government talking about it. Even NASA, we all know it's a joke. The committee, I mean, one astronaut even said, oh, wait, I did see something once. And he goes, it was a Bart Simpson Mylar balloon. So there's still, an effort to poke in the eye. But, we have some people, like I said, that are more wise than us. And they're going, listen, this is all part of it. Don't worry, right? There's going to be some accountability because it's NASA. Yeah. You're not going to be able to say we don't know, right? Unless you want to make yourself look totally useless and obsolete.
Yeah. Well, I think Jeremy Corbell actually said one thing I thought was true, like trying to take the positive note out of that hearing was at least they're pushing for the destigmatization of the subject.
Yeah.
And they're saying that we need to get rid of the stigma in order to improve the reporting and improve the observations and get better data. So we need to get rid of the stigma. So if nothing else, if they at least, making Bart Simpson balloon jokes doesn't help get rid of that stigma.
Or just get rid of that guy. We can get rid of him.
but if they truly do help diminish the stigma of talking about and reporting, then that'll be a good thing.
Yeah.
Even if we don't get the disclosure we want.
Well, we made progress quite a bit over the last 5 years. Ever since the article, I mean, you mentioned that, and to me, it got me off the couch and saying I need to get involved. I don't know how. So I got involved with MUFON, started investigating, led to the podcast, and get to talk to people like yourself now. It's crazy, but there's momentum. There's people actually standing up and saying, I need to contribute in some way. And just before we let you go here, I'm just curious. My top two focus of studies, the abduction phenomenon and cattle mutilation. What would be your top two?
Top two focus? Focus of study. I guess it would be recovered craft.
Yeah,
be the top one, and then what would be the other? I guess probably if I really think about it, probably the abduction phenomena.
Nice choice.
Although it's hard. I haven't focused on it as much as I should really, but it certainly seems to be the weirdest aspect of it and the most personal aspect of it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And just before we let you go, Dave, I know you're working on a podcast. You got something going. Do you want to just explain a little bit when that comes out, what you're planning to do with it?
Well, we've done 6 episodes to sort of to testing it out, and we're so we're cutting those all together now, and going to try and find the right spot for it. Hopefully in the next month or so, we'll start getting these up and running somewhere. But it's going to be a podcast called Really, hosted by myself and my friend Tom Wheeler, who's a screenwriter and novelist and showrunner. And basically, we're trying to be as I've described it as the UFO podcast for people that aren't already hosting their own UFO podcast.
Nice.
So we're trying to make it general enough as an on-ramp for people who are maybe just getting curious about it, and we punctuate really with question mark, exclamation mark, period, because I think that's the transition you go through once you get a little bit curious about the subject. You're then startled by what you find out, and eventually you sort of settle into going, all right, this is real.
Acceptance.
And, acceptance that there is a UFO reality. What it is, I don't think anyone knows, but there is one.
Yeah. Well said.
So we're going to try and basically just be an approachable on-ramp for people who are just getting curious about the subject.
Yeah, which is great. We need that. Somebody commented on Twitter this morning, like, why is the bulk of the population not interested in this subject? And I just commented below that we need to be the ones that start educating these people, at least catch them up to speed with what's going on. They're not ever going to accept it until we start having these conversations. It doesn't matter who you are on this planet. This affects everybody. So,
well, the more people who are doing what you guys are doing, having the conversation and being a place where people can tell their stories, it's just an incremental change, and everyone contributing to the conversation is going to eat away at the sort of this giant block of obfuscation.
Oh boy, is it ever a big block. Louis, do you have any final questions for Dave today?
No, just a big thanks, Dave. We appreciate your time. We know you're a busy guy and you got lots of stuff on the go, but thank you for making time for us. And we really like your way of thinking about things, your humility. You're very Canadian, and we love that. We
absolutely.
I can't seem to get rid of it.
No,
and people tell us, they say, we don't know what it is about you guys. You just have a certain niceness. It's called being Canadian. We're compassionate. We hear people out. We're not here trying to put people down. And I think the UFO community as a whole can learn a lot from that. If you go on UFO Twitter, it's not so pretty sometimes, but I think if we all just show a little compassion, even if somebody is completely out there and against what you believe, just leave them be. Yeah. Don't go out of your way to troll people and write negative comments on people's shows and everything else. Like, if I find something I don't like, I just keep going. It's not even worth my time. So don't be one of those people to poo-poo on everybody else. Just keep it to yourself. That's our advice to the world. But thank you for your time, and we'll turn it over to our viewers. What did you guys think of today's show? Let us know in the comment section. If you liked it, please give us a like, and if you haven't yet subscribed, please do so. We're on every platform: YouTube, Apple, Spotify. We're on the UNX network, and anywhere you get your favorite podcast. So with that, we want to say again, thanks, Dave. We'd love to have you back in the future. And if you ever want to get a couple Canadian dudes on your show, you let us know. I will. We'll be there.
All right, that'd be great. And thanks for having me on, and thanks for doing your podcast.
Awesome. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks.